Hey, Larken Rose here. Have you ever noticed how many movies and stories and TV series include a plot along the lines of somebody super evil is trying to get influence in government and buy control of the military or buy the politicians off or play these corrupt games? Oh my gosh, we have to stop that from happening. And it's a lot, and it's easy enough to miss. We were just watching like the older Sherlock Holmes thing where it's like, we're going to get our people into power and rule the world. We have to stop the bad people from... We can't have the power fall into the wrong hands, as if there are right hands for that. But there are lots of other movies and stories about exactly that. People trying to get influence. And if you look at history, that's also all of human history. Well, if you look how the Nazis got into power, yeah, they were elected into power, but there was all sorts of political stuff of, we're going to try to do this and wrangle ourselves into this position and get that there, and if we feign this over there, and literally just the news in the U.S., it's not hidden anymore, which, on one hand, it's kind of, you see how bonkers it is, but on the other hand, that's kind of good, because people can more and more see the ridiculous games that all sets of parasites are trying to do to get their hands on power. That's just... does anybody not know that? Do I really need to explain that to anybody? Because, yeah, Democrats want a bunch of immigrants coming in and voting that way. Both sides want to do whatever they can, including lying and cheating and stealing, to get votes to have their puppets in power. Now, ultimately, they're all puppets of the one ruling class, so it doesn't make that much difference anyway. But the whole thing of we're trying to rig votes over here, and then the call of Trump literally calling a state official and going, what do we have to do to get this number of votes so I win? Not what's the actual count of votes, how do you have to wrangle things so I win? So all these crooks, left, right, whatever, in any country at any point in time, are trying to vie for power. And for those of you who know the history of the Federal Reserve and all that, and the IMF, and, depending on just how extensive your knowledge is of the in-depth, obvious conspiracy, like if you don't know what Jekyll Island refers to, go look up the book by G. Edward Griffin. And if you read that, you'll go, holy crap. Blatant, obvious conspiracy to try to get the reins of power, whether it's international bankers or just local crooks, even little local elections. What do I have to do to win people over? Well, maybe we need some story that makes you look like one of the people, so we'll do this photo op thing that has nothing to do with who you are or what you've ever done before. We'll put you in a tank with a stupid-looking helmet. You can pretend you're pro-military, even though you've never done anything anywhere about anything before. So that's just given. Everybody knows that happens. Now, there's a whole range of how devious and diabolical the attempts are, but everybody knows that everybody trying to get power is playing games to get there. Like, everybody knows the cliche of shaking hands and kissing babies to get the voters to think you're a swell guy. Like, does anybody think, oh, well, that person must actually mean well because he did that? No. Everybody should instinctively understand, oh, he wants power, so he's pretending to be like us. He's pretending to care about this. And it's sort of funny when any politicians, left or right, do the thing of, living their whole life as elitist parasites of humanity and then trying to put on a show that's not at all convincing. Look, I'm one of you. Freaking, is it Schumer? With the barbecue, with the putting the burgers on with the cheese already on them, like raw burgers with cheese on them on a grill. It's like, yeah, sure, you've done that before, you dumbass. And, I mean, there's an infinite number of examples I could point to, because every politician does that. So there's the sort of innocent, still isn't innocent, but like they're lying a little bit to try to get you to like them, all the way up to they're doing devious crap of buying influence over there and over here. And it's funny that how much people are are complaining on both sides. Oh, it's Russian influence. It's Chinese influence. This politician was taking money from that in agreement to do this back. And everybody's throwing those accusations in both directions. And all of them absolutely, obviously do that constantly. And one really weird thing is the people who think that, well, if you're corruptly doing favors and buying influence with Americans in order to get power over your fellow man, well, that's sort of more okay than if you're doing it with Chinese people or Russians or something. Like, it's still corruption. It's still, they're playing stupid games and doing paybacks and like the whole Ukraine money laundering fest. It's still just power-happy bastards trying to get the reins of power. Well, here's a funny thing that hardly any of those movies ever mention, of they're trying to get the influence of this. And what if there wasn't that power? What if there wasn't a government to get control of? What if the people didn't believe in authority and so didn't bow to any government? So there aren't any politicians to go like buy the favoritism, buy this favor and get that guy in office and Manchurian candidate crap and like the 8,000 different ways that people, fictional and real, that you've heard of people trying to do nefarious things to get power. Well, what are they always doing to try to get power? To get the reins of government. Freaking Horton, here's a who. I just remember. And seize the reins of government. Most of you are probably thinking, what are you talking about? You have to be old. It's literally an old Dr. Seuss cartoon. Horton hears a who. And the elephant who hears a who gets accused of, you're making things up to try to seize the reins of government. It made it into Dr. Seuss, of all things. So it's all over the place. And hardly anybody backs up and goes, wait, why are there reins of government to grab? If there's all these diabolical plots, fictional or real, of like slimy people doing horrible things to take over our wonderful representative form of government, could it be that maybe there shouldn't be that power, that ring of power sitting on a table for anybody to try to grab? And it's amazing. It's another example of how lots of statists can see and complain about and be scared of the symptoms of authoritarianism. Bad people might try to get their hands on government, and the bad people in the international banking did all these scams and bought influence with the U.S. government. And you had the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 and all that, and they did all these devious plots and plans. Even most of the people who know that stuff, if you say, well, how about not having a ruling class for them to try to get control? No, we need that. We have to have a ruling class because chaos and mayhem and every man for himself. It's like, maybe instead of pointing to one example after another of evil people finding a way to grab hold of political power and then doing warmongering and mass murder and the worst things imaginable, and then just dismissing the idea of not having a ruling class at all, maybe you should actually pause for 10 seconds and take a look at the linchpin of all of these evil plot ideas, whether fictional or real. They all rely on there being a government political institution that the bad guys can take over. Now, those of you who understand history understand that the bad guys are the only people who have ever controlled that. There isn't a good way to violently rob and dominate innocent people, which is what every government always does. So there's only degrees of evil. Well, that ruling class just robs them and bosses them around. This one over here causes like world wars on a regular basis. So there's ranges of evil, but there is no good on that scale. There's no good on the scale of what government is used to do. It's always immoral violence. But this doesn't occur to people. And there are real world examples that are just like painfully obvious. And still, most people who can see the individual cases of where power got corrupted and these nasty people took over and they did their games and now they have the reins of power. and they did these horrible things. Most people who see that, it still doesn't occur to them to think maybe there shouldn't be reins of power for anybody to grab. And one of the saddest examples is the Vichy government in France during World War II, which was basically the Collaborator government. Nazis charge in, the French fight them for about 5 minutes, get their asses kicked, getting their asses blitzkrieged into oblivion. And then it wasn't that the German ruling class and its army said, now we're in charge. They didn't need to. They went in and said, well, now we're capable of killing all of you. Where are the sellout, spineless piece of crap French politicians who so much love power that they're willing to now become puppets of the Third Reich, oppressing their own damn people as long as they get to stay in power? And that was the Vichy government. Immediate traitors to their people. And the first thing the Third Reich went for in France to control the people. Like controlling them one by brute force, that's a lot of resources. Nobody has that much resources. But if we can use the resources of the existing ruling class that already robs and controls the people, if we can get the French police policing the people of France to do whatever the Third Reich tells them to do, if we just grab the reins of power in the already existing political system in France and like let the slimeball, spineless, evil bastards in French government, who we know will kiss the ass of the new invaders as long as they get to keep a little bit of power for themselves, well, it's pretty easy, quick transition to, well, you're mostly being bossed around by the same people and robbed by the same people and controlled by the same people. It's just the sleazebag, slimeball French parasites who were already victimizing and robbing the people of France. Well, now they're answering to a different set of crooks. Okay, so what fundamentally changed? Not a whole lot. Just whoever's at the top, the puppet master at the top, well, even that, not even really the top. The apparent top that most people knew about, that changed, whoop-de-doo. And even that cheesy but awesome movie, what's it called? Red Dawn. It was a fine example of invasions of Russians and a bunch of Americans with guns have to go, it's not up to the military and the police, we have to resist ourselves. Like cheesy movie, but fun and sort of cool because it expresses the mentality of people willing to resist. Now, the pathetic part about that is you're not willing to resist when the people robbing you and oppressing you and dominating you and treating you like livestock are Americans. Apparently you're okay with that because you get to like vote for your abuser. So that makes it okay. But if invaders come in, suddenly, oh, we're rough and tugged and rough and rugged, and now we're going to resist. Okay. But in that story, first thing that happens is, well, the Russians go to the local like police officer or whatever it was to look up the records of who has firearms. Because of course they would do that. If there was that list of records, okay, who do we have to worry about? And who are going to be complacent, obedient sheep because they don't have any means to resist us? So it showed up in that. It shows up in a billion different ways, including historical ways that aren't fictional. And what's so weird to me is the people who are super into conspiracies, not conspiracy theories, the actual conspiracies. Like the Bilderberg stuff, that's not debatable if you actually understand it. And if you don't, go buy James Corbett's new book, Reportage. the pompous pronunciation, because he gets into that. He has a bunch of essays, and some of them get into the Bilderberg stuff. That's not debatable. The international banks, what they did to control the currencies of all the countries, that's not debatable. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913, if you want a whole lot about that, go read Creature from Jekyll Island. Because the details aren't even in dispute. Like, what actually happened isn't in dispute. There's some of it that was secret, but there's enough of it that was done right out in the open and isn't at all debatable that you can look into it and find that stuff. There's a huge number of like conservatives and constitutionalists and maybe even sort of libertarian leaning people who get into that stuff and learn about all the details and all these slimy agreements and the slimy ways that they come in and basically buy governments. And the bankers will come in and say, well, if you let us control your currency and make this fiat bullshit and put everybody in debt and rob them blind, then we'll give you these kickbacks and we'll give you this power. We can't do it without the government, because if they come in and say, look, we have this new currency that's constantly going down in value and that is sketchy as hell, and you know it's from people who are supporting both sides of every war. Want to use it? And everybody would say, no, go boop yourself. But if they go to government and say, make people use this note shall be good for all public and private debts, and you have to accept it. And if somebody comes along and tries to do a competing currency, we'll send thugs of the state to go beat them up. Well, how convenient that there happen to be those reins of power in the political system for the international bankers or whoever else, China buying influence, Russia buying influence. And so, but look at all those people who are like really into learning about the Federal Reserve and the IMF and like all that stuff. Or even just the people today talking about China has undue influence because it's buying all this farmland, it's buying this and it's doing that. Russia is controlled, like Trump is controlled by Russia and he's not doing this, but he's going against that. Now, you can believe or disbelieve whichever version of those you want. At this point, I don't think there's anybody on the normal political spectrum who thinks that nobody is buying influence. They just argue about who's buying influence. Our guy is righteous and principled. Their guy sold out to the Russians, Chinese, Botswanians, whatever the hell the accusation is, and whether or not it's true. Everybody knows that happens. And yet of all those people zealously complaining, this is corruption, they're working against the American people, even Trumpites, who are like, look at the corruption and the blah, blah, blah. Okay, how about not having a pre-existing mechanism of extortion and control for the evil people to get their hands on? Well, no, it'd be chaos and mayhem. That is the linchpin of all of these plots, the fictional ones, the real ones, historical ones going back centuries. The linchpin is there being an authoritarian government for somebody to get their hands on, to get their hands on the reins of power. You can't do that if there aren't reins of power. And I try to describe this to people because people are so in the status mindset that they've never thought about this. And they say, well, if we didn't have a ruling class, who would protect us from like an invading army? Okay, what would us look like? There wouldn't be a government capable of surrendering on our behalf. There wouldn't be a legal system and a tax system for invaders to take over and then use against us. There would be, in the case of this country, 300 and some million people, about 100 million of which are armed. And by the way, those 100 million own about 300 million guns. So if each one hands a gun to a fellow neighbor because we're being invaded, now you have 300 million armed people, none of whom recognize the right of these invaders to rule us. Do you really think any military in the world has the capacity to long-term dominate and enslave 300 million armed people who don't want to be enslaved? Nope, utterly, absolutely impossible. What they can do is buy influence with the people already enslaving all those people, known as Congress and the state governments. Buy influence there, then you don't have to invade. The idea that like China's going to invade to try to take over, why don't they just buy influence like they already do? Russia's going to invade, and why don't they just buy influence like they already do? Somebody out there might enslave us. They already did. It's called Congress. And mostly they're Americans. I don't know why you think that's better than foreigners robbing you blind and treating you like livestock, but yeah, that already happened. And it's being done by the one organization with the ability to do it, because it's the one organization that the victims imagine to have the right to do it, because they're viewed as authority. That's our political system. That's our legal system. You have to pay your taxes. You have to obey the law, because what those people say, for some magic reason, isn't just threats, it's the law. And if you disobey our great and wise and benevolent political masters, you're the bad guy, you're the criminal, you're the scofflaw, you're the tax evader. So the slaves are literally cheering for the masters. And if one slave goes, I don't want to obey this master anymore, the other slaves, shame on you. How could you not pay tribute to our loving master? Oh, but our loving master protects us from other people who might come in. Other people couldn't do that because other people wouldn't be viewed as a legitimate authority that all these dumbass slaves are imagining an obligation to obey. They would be viewed as dangerous, scary enemies that you should probably shoot. But when they're robbed and controlled and dominated and abused by elected representatives, the brainwashing of the people says, oh, well, they're allowed to. And we're righteous and noble and virtuous for obeying whatever arbitrary bullshit that gang of parasites tells us. It wouldn't be true if China invaded or Russia invaded or Yemen is going to invade us tomorrow somehow. No, that wouldn't count. But these people, we have to bow to. We have to obey them. Yeah, that's why those are the only people capable of enslaving you. They are the linchpin to your enslavement. And this is true in any country. This is just, I'm referencing this because that's where I live and most of the people I talk to. That is the linchpin for enslaving Americans, is the American political system. That is the only thing that can enslave the American people. Everybody fighting in devious, nefarious ways to try to get their hands on control of the American political system doesn't change the fact that if there wasn't an American political system, there would be no linchpin. There would be no ability by anybody. I don't care what army they have. I don't care how much money they have. I don't care what swindles they do. Nobody would have the ability to enslave and control 300 million Americans if their victims didn't imagine an obligation to obey their victimizers. In other words, if they didn't believe in authority. So for all the people just watching the news or all the people into all these conspiracies who are like, oh, they did this devious thing to buy influence and buy this politician and this guy tried to act against the war machine and so they killed him, blah, 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 blah. What would that story look like if you pull out the linchpin of the belief in authority? Well, there's no war machine to take over. There's a bunch of armed people, but if some slimy person comes along and says, hey guys, let's go pointlessly kill a bunch of people on the other side of the world that haven't done anything to you and you don't even know them, all the people would say, let's not, and we're getting pretty close to shooting you for suggesting that, whoever you are, you frickin' psycho. But if it's pay your taxes to fund national defense, oh golly gee, some evil psychos somehow got their tentacles into the authoritarian monstrosity and they're starting wars all over the place. Gee whiz, what can we do about this? We need better people to get their tentacles into the authoritarian monstrosity and use it for us. So it's really weird that of all the people who understand and loudly complain about the intricacies of the symptoms of authoritarianism, so few of them can look at it and go, why don't we pull out the linchpin? Pull statism out of the equation, all of that falls apart. The Federal Reserve is frickin' gone if they don't have a government forcing their fraudulent bullshit on the rest of us. The war machine is frickin' gone if people aren't coerced to pay it and don't feel an obligation to hand over an insane amount of money to fund mass murder around the world. All the authoritarianism, the DEA, the ATF, all that corrupt crap, the CIA doing all manner of just despicable evil all over the world. If the CIA came to you, oh, now we're private, there's no authority, we can't tax you, but what you can know about us is we're this organization, you don't get to know anything about what we do, but we would like trillions of dollars so we can do a bunch of secret stuff. No, we've been caught causing wars and assassinating foreign leaders and running drugs and running guns and torturing people. Yeah, we've been caught doing that sometimes. But don't worry, if you just give us trillions of dollars, and you don't get to know how it's spent, by the way, and you don't get to know what we're doing, that's secret too, it's classified. But if all you people would just donate trillions and trillions of dollars to the now private CIA, we'll do good things. Would anybody fall for that? No. If 3 people did, okay, now the CIA's got $60, not really scared of them. But if people can first be indoctrinated into the idea of, well, you have to pay your taxes, and of course they have to do some things in secret, because national security. And so if occasionally they lose $1 trillion, and that becomes the news story, and then 2 really big buildings suddenly fall down, well, don't worry about that. I'm sure it was like foreign bad people. I'm sure nasty people would never have gotten their tentacles in to control the political machine of the U.S. That's impossible. We have the greatest country and the greatest system of government in the world. None of this shit can happen if you didn't believe in government. And I mean you, 300 million of you, or 7 or 8 billion, to cover the whole world. None of these plots work unless the victims and the people who fund these horrible machines of death feel an obligation to pay. Because if they don't give away their power to a ruling class, then there's not a ruling class. There isn't that linchpin of power for evil bastards, foreign or domestic, to come in and go, oh, I'll be taking that, thank you very much. Now suddenly the people are going, oh, I thought the military was protecting us and government was representing us, and now they're doing horrible, corrupt things. Gee whiz, how could that possibly have happened? Because you gave your power away, because you were indoctrinated into this goofy, stupid, anti-human belief system. And so many people that recognize the problems, they don't recognize the root. And so if you suggest, maybe we should pull out the linchpin, which is the belief in authority, which all that shit relies on. It cannot be there. The warmongering can't be there. The currency fraud cannot be there. The police state fascist thuggery, it cannot be there among a population that doesn't believe in authority. But the suggestion of maybe we shouldn't have that there, that all this evil shit relies on, makes most people go, no, that's crazy. We need to put that linchpin back in. And then complain about the results that happen every single frickin' time as a result of that linchpin being there. The belief in authority. That's all that humanity has to do. Bink! The end. Humanity doesn't need to understand how the Federal Reserve fraud even works. It doesn't even need to know all these slimy things. It doesn't need to know the behind the scenes false flag crap that militaries around the world have been doing for centuries. All those fall apart without most people ever knowing how they work if you just pull out the stinking linchpin. But watch how quickly and instinctively, just a gut reaction in most people, because you're pulling out the main thing they were taught to believe in their indoctrination, in the Prussian indoctrination system. Now it's called Western education. Look it up. That was another conspiracy that is not debatable. The Prussian indoctrination system, which the Western education system is directly modeled after, it was designed to make people be unthinking pawns of the ruling class. And they said so out loud when they were doing it to begin with. Now they pretend it's something else. But the fact that belief in all the good people's heads and their unwillingness to look at it, and they're discomforted even questioning it, that is the entire obstacle to doing away with all this shit. The warmongering, the fraud, the oppression, all that goes away if you pull the linchpin out. And that's why I focus almost everything I do in trying to yank that linchpin out of people's brains. Because when enough people go dink in their own brain and go, oh, well, that's reality. That's how the world works. This isn't lawmakers. It's lying, parasitic thug crooks. It's a mafia that somehow tricked us into thinking we're obligated to obey them. And when enough minds escape the linchpin and pull it out and just see reality, that's the end. It's over. We won. And so many people, so mortified at the symptoms of statism and authoritarianism, still can't bring themselves to pause long enough to look at the linchpin and actually carefully think, what's that doing there? How did that get there? How did I get to the point where I really and truly believed that a bunch of people over there that I don't know have the right to demand money from me and have the right to control my choices and behaviors. Who put this linchpin here? That's all that needs to happen, is enough people notice it and go, who put this linchpin here? That's the end of war, literally. It's the end of the banking frauds. It's the end of oppression. It's the end of fascism. So just that, and what's frustrating is it's such a simple thing to say and to describe, but doing it when people have been indoctrinated into this for their whole life, massive amounts of efforts have been made so that they don't ever notice the linchpin and what it's doing. It's a really difficult thing to get well-intentioned, good, intelligent people to back up and go, who put this in my brain? And do I really need it? That's literally the solution to the vast majority of humanity's problems, is getting enough people to look at the belief in authority and go, who put this here? And can we just, boink? Oh, the world didn't come to an end. War came to an end. Fascism came to an end. A whole lot of the divide and conquer came to an end. Dink. The end. We win. It doesn't require a big revolution. It requires people looking into their own brains and finding the crap that was put there by evil psychos indoctrinating and propagandizing the people into going along with their own victimization and abuse. Which is why that's what I focus on, is the frickin' linchpin. So, first see if you can notice your own linchpin. Yank it out, and then see if you can help your fellow man notice that, somebody stuck a linchpin in their brain, too, to totally warp their view of right and wrong and morality and humanity and pretty much everything else. Yeehaw.